Hey guys, it's Joe, and in this video I'm going to show you how to creatively edit samples. This is a really good process to do because you can essentially take any sample that you want and manipulate it to be something else. I use this a lot in tracks when I would use a sample for adding layers to something, whether it was for its intended purpose or not. So for example, I'll be demonstrating this on glass breaking and a bit of water. There's an endless list of processes that you can use to manipulate samples. However, I'll just be showing you a few of them today and just a few of the processes that I do to create more interesting sounds. So I'll just show you what we'll be working with. This is the glass breaking and this is the water. So they're just nice and simple samples that we can play around with a bit. So before I actually manipulate any samples, chances are I've got an idea in my head of what I want to add to my track, and I'll try and pick it out of some of the samples that I've got. So for example, with this glass breaking, I wanted to layer it with a hi-hat. So I heard the end part of the glass breaking and thought that could work quite nicely with a hi-hat. It's just got quite a nice bit of high end and a bit of attack to it. So with that, we just want to chop off the front of the audio file essentially. So we're just going to reduce that and try and find the part that we're after. So it's around here. Of course, this is just a demonstration. You can be as precise as you want. You can zoom in much closer than I have to get a very precise result. So even with this, if I just line it up, it'll start to sound somewhat like a hi-hat. Obviously not perfect. We haven't done anything to it yet. We've just chopped it up. But layered with a hi-hat, it could sound quite cool. So from here is where we want to start tweaking it. And one of the first things I do is take out any of the frequencies that I don't actually want to use. So I'm just going to bring up the EQ, and again, as I said, I want to use this for a hi-hat. Just going to take out a bunch of low end. So we're going to start reducing that. Okay, so it's about there, but it still sounds very brittle. So I just want to use a bit more EQ. I want to find that part. It's probably this great big peak here, and just drop that out. There we go, so it sounds a little easier on the ear now. And once we've done this, that's when we can start to get creative and start adding on whatever we fancy. So first of all, I'm going to put on a bit of compression. When I say a bit, I mean a lot, because we want to use creative compression opposed to just like normal compression that we'd use in mixing. So I just want to use the Studio VCA. It's one of my favorite compressors. We're going to turn these off. We're going to have a really quick attack, about 1 millisecond. Try a really quick release and then a really long release. See what's going on. Drop the threshold right down. Turn the ratio right up, about 11:1 works quite nicely. And give it a bit of makeup gain and probably a bit of distortion. So it's sounding quite aggressive now, which would work quite nicely with the hi-hat. Again, you can tweak this to whatever you want. You can always try some of the other compressors. As they all sound quite different, but I'll just stick to the VCA for now. See what it sounds like with a long release. Takes away some of the harshness, so I'll probably leave it at about 10 or so, as it's still got some of that in there. Next, I'm just going to add a bit of delay, so we'll go over here and add that in. Just want a bit of tape delay in there, and then we can play around with the low cut and high cut of the actual delay itself. So again, I just want the high end coming back in, but even higher than what we've cut out from the normal EQ. I want it quite quick as well, so we'll have it at 16th. Turn the dry up to 100%. Maybe a bit more feedback. So it just thickens it up a bit more now. If we could always make it a bit quicker too. Because we don't want it to sound too separate, we just want it to sound, as I said, a bit thicker. We can also play around with the LFO rate and the intensity, but because I'm using very quick delay, you won't necessarily hear that. But if we put it to more of extreme settings, then maybe we'll start to. Yeah. So you can just hear it slightly in the background there. So I'll leave that on actually, because just a bit of differentiation in there is always quite nice. And what's always a good idea is to put a bit of reverb on whatever you're using, because chances are, well, you should have reverb on practically everything in your track, so it all sits together nicely. So we want to do the same with this. It's no different. I've already set up a reverb bus here with just a standard Space Designer reverb on here, and we want to just start bringing some of that in. Like so. So those are just a few things you can do, and we'll just move on to the water now so I can demonstrate some more. So another good idea to do when playing with samples is to reverse them, because you can always get some really interesting results like that. So on Logic, if we just double click on our audio file, go into File here, into Functions, and just go Reverse. I'm not necessarily going to use it for this one in particular, but it's always a good idea to just see what happens really, because it's very hard to tell what is going to happen when you do reverse an audio sample, especially if it's a longer one like this. So I could have done it with the glass breaking over here, have a better idea of what that would have sounded like. It would almost sound like a reverse crash, so we could always use that to bring in the hi-hats per hit or have them fade out of it. But for this, I'll probably just leave it as normal, so I'll just go back, you have to reverse it again, and then it'll be normal. And now we'll start editing it the same kind of way. So for this, I was looking for something to kind of fill in some high end in the background to maybe make a chorus sound a bit bigger. So again, I just want the high end from this. So go into our EQ, start trimming out the low end. Bit too high. Yeah, around there. Because we just want this to fill out some space. We don't want too much of the detail in it, because it's going to be in the background anyway. And as I said, because I want it more in the background, I'm going to put a bit of reverb on it, but have more of the wet signal coming through than the dry, to make it almost sound like it's quite far away and in the distance. So we're just going to open up the Space Designer. We'll just go for a relatively large sound. We'll just go medium, halls, space reverb. See how that sounds. Cool. So we want to drop the dry down. Ooh, not sure how I feel about that. I'm going to take out some of the low end, do this on pretty much all my reverb. And because we're only getting the high end out of this, we're going to take out quite a lot up here. Because again, this is just going to be a background noise. It doesn't sound great on its own, but when it's in the background of a track, it's just going to fill out some of that space. And we can always turn up or turn down the amount of reverb. Probably just turn it down a little bit again, actually. Cool. And next we're going to add a bit of modulation. So the modulation on here is really, really good, because you can get so many results that will be unique to you, and it will have a different effect on each sample you're using. So for this, I want to use a bit of tremolo. So it's going to essentially make this duck in and out, and I want to put that around the kick, essentially. We could sidechain a compressor to it, but just for this, I'm just going to demonstrate it on some tremolo, because you can always play around with it to do something else. So if you don't know what it sounds like, this is what it sounds like. However, at the moment it's panning between left and right. I don't really want it to do that. So we're just going to go and select mono tremolo. And it's coming through as one, but we want it on the notes, not just the rate. And I want it on a quarter note, because as I said, I want it working around the kick. Chances are this will be with a 4 to the floor kick, so it will match up with that. I want the smoothing quite aggressive. And from there, that's when I tweak the offset and the symmetry. In fact, I'm going to tweak that a bit now, make it a bit longer. So then it will kind of be dancing around the kick a bit. Another interesting thing you can do, which works in my opinion, very well with longer samples like this, is you can run it through a guitar amp. So if anything, I'm going to put this above these two, just in here, amps and pedals, go into Amp Designer, and I just want a clean tone for it. I'm going to go for clean country reverb. I'm going to turn the reverb off because we've already got some of that. Take some of the treble out, otherwise it sounds a bit harsh. And we can always move the mic around as well to get something more precise. And that's really worth playing around with as well. There are so many possibilities with just the amps, let alone adding any EQ, reverb, distortion, delay, anything like that on top. There are many, many possibilities. So again, I've just outlined and highlighted a few processes today about what you can do to edit your own samples and how you can make them work with your tracks. I've just demonstrated 2 higher end ones, whereas plenty of times I've used like an impact sound, taken out all the high end and use it to beef up a kick. Really, really good for doing stuff like that. Add some compression on top, maybe a bit of saturation or other distortion, and you get quite a nice full low end sound. So it's really, really worth playing around with. I couldn't recommend it enough. I hope you found this video useful, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment or contact me via my website. Thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.